Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day number 781, May the 14th, 2019, Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Yes. Well, yesterday, in a furious series of tweets, President Trump called out Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray. Oh, yes. Man, I've been sitting back for the past couple of months watching this guy, like many of you, thinking, God, he sucks. How did we get him? Rodenstein, recommended by Rodenstein. And I'm just thinking, man, what a horrible appointment that was. And I've been wondering for a long time what Trump must think of Ray, because he's never really commented too much on Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray, other than right after he appointed him, said he was a good man or whatever. But Trump says that about everybody. Until they screw up. So it was very, very heartwarming, I should say, on Sunday when I saw that tweet and saw Trump finally calling out No Shit Sherlock Christopher Ray. And in the tweet he said, quote, "The FBI has no leadership. The director is protecting the same gang that tried to overthrow the president through an illegal coup." Unquote. So there you go. He's not just calling out Christopher Ray, No Shit Sherlock Ray. He's basically getting very, very detailed and saying that he is protecting, that means covering up, those who tried to overthrow the president. That would be him. So if you're covering up a crime, and overthrowing the President of the United States is a crime, if you're participating in covering up that kind of a crime, that's a crime. Man, you know, I hear people like Sean Hannity and others say, oh, the FBI, they're just 100%, man, they're fantastic. It's just a tiny, 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 tiny little people at the top. What about those 40 FBI agents that were working for Uncle Bob the Executioner? What about those two guys who gave Papadopoulos the once-over, including the one who said, yeah, this is what happens when you work for Trump? Now, there's a lot of bad apples, my friends. A lot of bad apples in the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her. And the worst of the bunch is sitting right at the top. Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray. Now, I blew my shit about 3 days ago on a YouTube video because of No Shit Sherlock Christopher Ray. Normally, even as angry as I get, I rarely start throwing stuff and bouncing tables around. But on that particular day, and it was a story touched off by No Shit Sherlock Christopher Ray that caused me to come unglued. If I had, man, he should fire him tomorrow. That's what, I really wish Trump would just clean the house. And I think he's going to. And I think after all this has worked itself through, and the indictments have come down, and this thing is reaching its conclusion, I believe there will be a severe house cleaning at both the FBI and DOJ. Right now, he might take a lot of flack for it. But once this is all come out, it's all been proven, the indictments are coming down, the stories are being told, at that point, there'll be sufficient reason for Trump to just clean the house at the FBI, the DOJ, the State Department, the whole damn thing, the whole swamp. Did he not say he was going to drain the swamp? Well, that's what you got to do. You got to pull the plug and suck it all down. Every one of the damn swamp creatures. Down the pipe, into the sewer where they belong. No shit, Sherlock Christopher Ray. He's just got a face that you want to slap. Or punch, in my case. It's a big news day, by the way. So I gotta move on. God. You're not gonna... Actually, you will believe this. Normally, I would say you're not gonna believe this, but you guys will believe this because we're talking about OcasioCortezs, the wild-eyed commie. She is now saying that her 12-year deadline for world-ending warning about climate change was only dry humor. and that you'd have to have the social intelligence of a sea sponge to think it's literal. Oh my God. She must think we're really stupid. We saw those passionate speeches she was giving. We've got to do something. We've got 12 years, or we're going to lose the earth. Yeah, right. Of course, this was the feature statement that was used in the release of the Green New Deal. But it's funny that she says that you'd have to be, you'd have to have the social intelligence. I'm not sure what social intelligence is, but you would have to have the intelligence of a sea sponge to think it's literal. In other words, to take her literally when she said that that the world would end in 12 years if we didn't do something about climate change. Now, that's bullshit, and she knows it's bullshit. She knows a lot of people took that very seriously. In fact, so seriously that about half of the damn presidential candidates went out after she said it and began repeating on it and campaigning on it. They would be Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and the skateboarder. Every single one of them, after she came out with the statement, we've got 12 years or we're going to lose the planet. Every one of them came out, jumped right on it, and began campaigning on it, repeating it. So I guess that means that Booker, Sanders, Harris, Biden, and Beto are all dumber than sea sponges. That's what she's saying, is she not? Not only that, we had an entire group of thousands of students, thousands of students who went on strike for her new Green Deal, based on the fact that the planet was going to come to an end in 12 years if we didn't do something about climate change. And how about that? How about those kids that cornered Diane Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein? Remember that? They came to her office, and she's standing there, and they all start giving her the grief about the about climate change, and we have 12 years, and blah, 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 blah. And even Feinstein had to tell them that they're a little nutty. There you go, the wild-eyed commie, OcasioCortezs, or should we begin calling her Ocasio-Sea-Sponge-Cortez? You know, she's getting in on Dumbass. She's probably disappointed that she watches the videos and she wasn't Dumbass of the Week. She hasn't been doing very well lately. And maybe she wants to reclaim that title. So maybe she wanted to start off the week fresh with a very, very strong entry into Dumbass of the Week for this upcoming week. Well done. I'd say AOC with this comment will definitely be at least a top 5 contender this week for Dumbass of the Week. Okay, more on the regarding the notes on the Kathleen Kvalik situation, and not so much on her notes, but we're now finding out that she sent a follow-up email to the person who coordinated that meeting between her and Chrissy Steele. So the day after the meeting with Chrissy Steele, Kvalik sent an email to Jonathan Weiner, thanking Weiner for facilitating her meeting with Steele and telling him how very helpful he was in making that happen. Weiner was also a source for the September 2016 story written by Michael Isikoff of Yahoo News that was used along with the dossier to get the FISA on Carter Page. Weiner also passed the Corey Shearer dossier to Chrissy Steele in October of 2016. And of course, Shearer has been identified as a close associate of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Weiner was also quoted in several articles as a source for the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. He was interviewed And I believe a while back they actually did release some of the transcripts, but we probably need to see the rest of them. Of course, some of the things that we know now, they didn't know then. So they probably, Lindsey Graham should probably call Jonathan Weiner back for a little chat. Don't you think? My very first question would be, Jonathan, were you in any way acting on the direction of the rotten Reverend Clinton in making contact with Steele, Cody Shearer, or anyone in the State Department? That would be my question for Jonathan Weiner. I'm sure many of you have questions of your own. Okay. Oh, by the way, Trump did meet today with Viktor Orban from Hungary. And this could be significant. First of all, for those of you who don't know, Viktor Orban, when he won his election, he is being touted as the European Trump. He's very much like Trump. And one thing that he did, which probably makes Trump really happy, is he built, in violation of EU policy and directly contradicting direct orders from the EU, he constructed miles and miles of fencing to keep out migrants. He didn't build a wall, but he built some very high fencing that is electric fencing, I believe. It's electric fencing, I believe. You touch it and you get shocked. And I think he has armed guards also that patrol it. But he built very, very tall electric fencing to keep out migrants. And so essentially functioning like a wall. But more importantly, Hungary is the home, the birthplace of George Soros. And one of the things that Orban did right after he was elected was he basically, proclaimed that if George Soros steps foot in this country, he will be arrested. And he hates Soros. And there's no question in my mind that in their conversations that Orban probably mentioned to Trump something about Soros and probably said, hey, Mr. President, you better watch out for this guy. You better watch out for this guy because all the people that are coming after you, he's bankrolling many of them. He was bankrolling several of the people that were involved and still involved. I mean, he's bankrolling one of his organizations is who is paying Confusion GPS and Christopher Steele. Even to this day, as far as I know, they're still being paid by an organization funded by George Soros, along with that staffer, former staffer of Diane Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein, Mr. Jones. He's also being funded by Soros. So I have no doubt that Orban probably talked to Trump about Soros and probably said, hey, what can we do with this guy? You know what Viktor Orban would like to do with him? I'm pretty sure I know. You ready for this one? In the first week of October 2016, key date, the first week of October 2016, just after Chrissy Steele met with FBI agent Michael Gaeta in Rome, CrowdStrike's owner was on a rare vacation in Rome, Dmitry Alperovich, and he was burning up the phone lines, lobbying the government to publicly blame the Russians for the DNC hack. The source of this is Esquire magazine. A few days later, the DNI, that would be Clapper, that's right, Clapper, and Department of Homeland Security head Jay Johnson made the public statement that Russia hacked the DNC. The statement was followed by a phone call from an unnamed government official to Alperovich, thanking him for pushing the government along. Who are the two principals of CrowdStrike? Alperovich and Sean Henry. Who's Sean Henry? Well, Sean Henry, prior to forming, along with Alperovich, CrowdStrike, he was one of the FBI's top forensic investigators in cyber warfare, cyber crime. He's a cyber expert. So is Alperovich. Sean Henry hates Trump. He's a far, far leftist who hates Trump, as is Alperovich. Not only is Alperovich a far leftist, he's a hardcore Atlanticist. He belongs to the Atlanticist group. The Atlanticists are a group of Russians who despise Putin and Putin's policies and anyone who's anti-EU. Alperovich is a totally pro-Western, pro-EU type who despises Putin. So the two guys who are credited for telling us who hacked the DNC are two guys who are far left-wing radicals. One, former FBI. One, a Russian who hates Putin, is an Atlanticist. These are the guys that gave us the Russians hacked the DNC. And now we find out that Alperovich was literally lobbying the DNI, Clapper, along with Jay Johnson, to push the Russian narrative, and took about a week, and they followed through and did it, then called him and thanked him for pushing it. You know, I really hope that as all this is being unraveled, and it seems like you kind of have to go in reverse to unravel this crime, and I think William Barr, hopefully, I believe he is, doing that. I hope he finally gets back to that point where he says, wait a minute, this was all started on this Russian narrative, which we know was started by Alexandra Chalupa in Ukraine. It was followed up by blaming the Russians for the DNC hack in the spring of 2016. It was Mr. Sussman, Hillary's lawyer, who brought in CrowdStrike, who himself worked for the FBI and the Justice Department. A career spook. You got to hope at some point William Barr goes, you know what? The DNC wouldn't let us look at those servers. I think we need to look at them servers. I think we need to look at those servers. I really do. Something else. I think we need to talk to Assange. You know, more charges, I guess. They charged Assange with a year. He's going to get a year in jail for not appearing in court. Now it looks like Sweden wants to come back and bring back those sexual assault charges on him. So why is all this happening now? After, they sit on this sealed indictment. They come up with the indictment, but they seal it until Mueller is done with his investigation. Then as soon as Mueller is done with his investigation, boom, they unseal the indictment. Then Assange is dragged away. Now he gets a year jail time from the UK. Now we've got Sweden saying, well, we think we're going to bring back those charges. Why are they coming down so heavy on Assange now after all this time? And why did they have the indictment sealed for so long until almost immediately after the Mueller report is done? There's a bunch of different ways you can look at this, but the conspiratorial part of my mind says, if you wanted to cut a deal with Julian Assange, what would you want? You would want Assange to be facing some serious jail time and some serious consequences. A lot on his shoulders that he would like to have removed from his shoulders, lifted from his shoulders. So you apply all this heat on Assange, and then you let him sweat for a few months. And then you come to him and say, hey man, you got a lot of weight on your shoulders, brother. I wouldn't want to be you. We can lift that weight off your shoulders, my friend. We can make that happen. We're the United States of America. We can get the Swedes to back down. We can get the UK to throw that out of court, to reverse it. We can get them to do whatever we want them to do, because, quite honestly, as far as the UK is concerned, we got the goods on them, and the Swedes aren't going to fight us. We can make a lot of your problems go away, Julian. All you got to do is prove, and you say you can, because remember, Assange told Dana Rohrabacher when Dana Rohrabacher went to London. Dana Rohrabacher goes to London. He talks to Assange. He comes back and says Assange has a message for Trump. He also says that Assange can prove with documentary evidence that the Russians or no state actor hacked the DNC. And then what happens? 3 months later is when the charge against Assange is made as a sealed indictment. The indictment on Assange came 3 months after Rohrbacher came back and said Assange can prove that the Russians and the DNC didn't hack the DNC. Rohrbacher gets this information. 3 months later is the indictment, boom, which is sealed. Then as soon as the Mueller report is ended, boom, it's unsealed. Now we have the heat coming down on Assange big time. I can only hope that this is somehow part of a plan that Barr is running so that he can drop a bunch of heat on Assange and let him sweat for a few months so that they can send some FBI agents over there and see if Assange wants to produce the documents which will back up what he says, which is that the Russians did not hack the DNC. And if Barr goes that far down the rabbit hole, if he does that type of a deep dive, boy oh boy. And here's something else. Do you think that anywhere in all them thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of classified, unredacted, classified and redacted documents that we're not allowed to see, do you think anywhere in any of them documents the name Seth Rich appears? Just a thought. Do you guys like riddles? Here's one for you. Who was Robert Mueller's deputy director at the FBI? Who was Robert Mueller's deputy director at the FBI when Robert Mueller was the FBI director? I'm sure you guys are Googling away. Sean Henry, the co-owner and co-founder of CrowdStrike, was Bob Mueller's deputy director at the FBI. Oh my God, I forgot to mention this yesterday. I'm glad I'm getting to it today. Did any of you happen to catch Rand Paul on Sunday morning this week with George Stephanopoulos? So Stephanopoulos blew it big time, and I don't know if he just didn't have the information, if he didn't know the information, or if he thought Rand Paul didn't know the information. But they're having this discussion, and Rand Paul basically blows up George Stephanopoulos. You got to watch it. Just type in ABC this week, Rand Paul, click on past week, and it'll come up, and you'll see the Rand Paul interview with George Stephanopoulos. And you'll notice in that clip, they get into this the political situation, the Democratic candidates and Joe Biden. At which point, Rand Paul tells Stephanopoulos, he says, "Hey, I think what we ought to be looking into is the fact that Hunter Biden, just months after being kicked out, dishonorably discharged from the military for getting caught using drugs. Hunter Biden was kicked out of the military for using illegal drugs. And just a few months after that, he's a lobbyist. Lobbying in Ukraine, where he finds himself getting paid $50,000 a month by that Ukrainian company at the exact same time that Daddio, who's VP, creepy Joe Biden, was lobbying to stop an investigation into that company that Hunter Biden was now essentially working for or being paid by. And of course, again, this happened shortly after Hunter Biden is kicked out of the military. I mean, how many people you know get kicked out of the military for using illegal drugs, bad conduct discharge, and 3 months later, their daddy, who's a senator, has them hooked up with some corrupt Ukrainian company getting $50,000 a month kickbacks, while Daddio goes and throws his weight around to stop an investigation that could have incriminated Hunter Biden. Man, there's a lot of corruption there. So anyway, Rand Paul basically tells this to Stephanopoulos. At which point, Stephanopoulos, man, he's fumbling. He's like, no, that's not true. And Rand Paul looks right back. Oh, yes, it is true. It's exactly what it says in the New York Times. Read it, George. It's exactly what it says. Hunter Biden kicked out of the military for using illegal drugs, bad conduct discharge. 3-4 months later, he's getting $50,000 from his corrupt Ukrainian company. At the same time, Daddio, the VP, is trying to and succeeds in getting the prosecutor who was looking into the corrupt company that was paying Hunter Biden the money, gets him fired. That's exactly what it says in the New York Times. George and Stephanopoulos, man, he was like, man, you've never seen anybody change the subject so fast in your life. First, he tried to question Rand Paul. First, he tried to, oh, no, that's not what. He goes, no, that's not what. At which point, Rand Paul jumps right back in and says, oh, yes, it is, George. Oh, yes, that's exactly what the New York Times story says. Read it, George. At which point, he reiterates what he just said. At which point, George Stephanopoulos is like fumbling papers. He's like, moving on. Definitely got him. Stephanopoulos, either Stephanopoulos did not know about Hunter Biden being kicked out of the military, bad conduct discharge for using drugs, or he didn't know that Rand Paul was aware of this Ukrainian stuff, or maybe Stephanopoulos is not aware of this stuff. Because remember, these liberal reporters, a lot of the stuff that we talk about and stuff, they know nothing about it because they're not interested in it. And if they even hear something about it, they turn their head the other way and run the other way. They do not even want to hear about it. They don't want to read the documents. They don't want to hear the witnesses. They don't want to even have anything to do with it. So in a lot of cases, the things that we talk about and what Rand Paul was saying is, to a lot of these liberals, it's new news. They don't know it. And so Stephanopoulos, man, he just opened the door for Rand Paul, and Rand Paul just smoked him. Smoked him bad. Watch the video. It's hilarious watching Stephanopoulos, man, get rattled. Unbelievable. Well, here you go. It looks like Fox is canceling Empire. That's right, they're canceling Empire, and they have no plans to bring back Jussie. They're not going to bring back Jussie in the final season finale. No more Jussie. And Jussie's got a lot of problems. That's not over, as well as that prosecutor. She's also got a lot of problems. All those people have a lot of problems. Okay, here's one that I find this next thing I'm going to tell you, I find this to be extraordinary. I mean, this is actually hard to do. Let me go ahead and tell you what I'm talking about here. So looking at the Democrats, the Democrat field running for president, this freak show circus that's just extraordinarily, it's the worst I've ever seen. I mean, I thought 2016 was bad with the Rotten Reverend and Bernie and what's his name. This field, even though there's like 25 of them in the field, it's hard to imagine any of these people even getting close to being president, including Biden. Remember, Biden's run twice before. He never even makes it out of Iowa. His nickname is 1% Joe. He's never cracked 1%. He's sitting at 35%, but all that tells you is because the rest of the field is so freaking bad. It's so freaking bad. That's why he's sitting at 35%. If there was a rational, reasonable Democrat running, he'd be at 1%. But he's the closest thing you can find to sane. And he's nuts. But his numbers are going to fall. And I think that I think we're still going to see one or two big name people throw their hat in the ring. One of them is the rotten Reverend Clinton. Especially because as the weeks and months go on, this Ukraine story is not going away. It is going to catch up to Biden, and it's going to bite him in the ass. Joe Bite Me is about to be bitten in the ass by his own doing, hung with his own petard, and of course he's up to his eyeballs in Spygate. We know that. We know he was in that meeting where Susan Rice wrote the cover your ass note. And we know who else was in that meeting, and they were talking about the Spygate thing. Biden's up to his eyeballs in that. I think these things, on top of just Joe Biden taking himself out, I don't think he can go a long period of time without all this adding up. So I think the right Reverend Clinton is sitting back watching. She knows all this, and she'll make sure that the Ukraine story pops up and bites Joe in the butt. She'll make sure of it. Although she's got to be careful, because she'll also get bitten in the butt by the same thing. Ukraine is potentially deadly to both Biden and the rotten Reverend Clinton. So that's a tricky one for the rotten Reverend Clinton to pull off. But she's arrogant enough that she probably would try to stick Uncle Joe with the Ukraine deal. And even though it would probably draw her in, she probably believes that she's slick enough that she could spin out of it and that he's not. That's probably how she looks at it. So anyway, looking at the Democratic field, and it's a bad field. It's a field full of clowns. It's a clown show. It's a clown car. It's craziness. It's a circus, as many people have said. But as you look at that, and you see that you have one individual in there who was one of the very first to throw her hat into the ring. She is a female candidate. She is a senator, and was one of the first people out there. She's been raising some money. But when we look at the poll, we find that this particular person, Kirsten Gillibrand, is currently sitting and polling at 0. 0%. Oh my God, 0%. Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how hard that is? You're a senator. You're a woman. You've been raising some money. You've got name recognition. You're out there. You're one of the first people to throw your hat in the ring. And here you are 3, 4, 5 months down the road. And you're polling at 0. Oh my God. How's that possible? How's that possible? I bet you if one of us tried that, we couldn't do it. I bet if one of us was a senator and we had people giving donations, we were out there on the campaign trail, we'd been to Iowa, we'd been to New Hampshire, we'd been here, we'd been there, been everywhere, and after 4 or 5 months of our efforts, we were sitting at 0. Oh my God. Oh my God. That's pitiful. That's pitiful. I almost want to send her a sympathy card. Well, maybe an empathy card. No one makes empathy cards. I wonder why not. Maybe that's a good business idea. Empathy cards. I mean, when you go to the card section, I was just there on Mother's Day. A couple days before Mother's Day, actually. Looking for a Mother's Day card. They have a sympathy section, but they have no empathy section. That's strange. Because what it really should be is an empathy section. Because in most cases, it's empathy that we're feeling, not sympathy. Now, many of you are saying, well, what's the difference, Mike? Well, there's a big difference. Sympathy is when you hurt with someone. Empathy is when you hurt for someone. Sympathy, you hurt with them, you grieve with them, you're sad with them. Empathy is that you grieve for them. And this is what the correct term should be, really, in most cases, empathy, not sympathy. So someone needs to start a business making empathy cards. And I empathize with Kirsten Gillibrand, but I don't sympathize with her. I don't even like her. Don't even like her. I wouldn't put my shoe up her ass because I don't want my shoe dirty. Now, let's see. Well, maybe the shoes I cut grass in. Maybe I put the shoe I cut grass in up Gillibrand's ass, but not my good shoes. Not my good gym shoes I keep clean. Okay, so just a minute left here on that. And yeah, at this point in the game, we've been doing these videos now. This is day 781. I am now happy and feeling very, very good about the fact that I can finally say, after 781 days, this game is over. You know, you reach that point in the game, in a football game, where you look at the clock and you realize that it's just simply mathematically impossible for the other team to come back and win. Even if Tom Brady is throwing. And you could have Tom Brady, quarterback. You could have Lynn Swann and Jerry Rice as your receivers. And you could have the 1985 Chicago Bears offensive line. And you still can't win the game. It just can't happen. Nope, it's over. It is over. It's just a matter of time now for the story to be written. And it's all on my timeline. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have a good night. See you. Bye.